I am Annette Williams. I'm the chairperson of the Women's Spirituality PhD program and the Women, Gender, Spirituality, and Social Justice Master's program at CIIS. This evening, we have the pleasure of welcoming Mytrae Meliana to speak with us about her book, Brown Skin Girl, an Indian American woman's magical journey from broken to beautiful. So, when 16-year-old Mytrae Meliana and her family immigrated from India to the United States, she is determined to avoid the arranged marriage her family expects her to have and to create her own destiny. But when she falls in love with an American man, her family drags a talented graduate student back to India and keeps her hostage. Mytrae suddenly finds herself heartbroken and trapped in her homeland, where women's fates are decided for them. But that isn't her only challenge. She must decide, live a lie and keep the secret she'd rather forget, or dare to break with centuries-old tradition and forge a path of her own. Mytrae's searing, sensual memoir is about how family loves and wounds each other, about how immigrants are torn between cultures, and about leaving everything to find yourself. At times, it is heartbreaking, at times triumphant. Brown Skin Girl is a testament to freedom, love, and the magic that finds you when you follow your heart. Mytrae Meliana is an award-winning author, spiritual teacher, speaker, and holistic psychotherapist. She leads workshops for women who desire to heal from trauma, liberate themselves from patriarchy, connect with the divine feminine, and create true, bold, inspired lives. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Please join me in welcoming Mytrae Meliana.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Annette and V. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. It's just lovely to be back at CIIS, even though I'm not there physically. I just feel so connected to our community, having studied there and taught in women's spirituality. I'm so happy that you're hosting this. Thank you for that. And I'm excited to be here with all of you to share about Brown Skin Girl. um, so I would love to really first hear from you all. I would love for you to introduce yourselves and maybe just, say your name and where you're from, and what brings you to this book talk.
I won't go first, but I just want to add that I forgot to mention that the event is being recorded. So I'd ask that you know that, everyone who's present knows that.
Thank you. Yes, and if somebody's not good with that, that's totally fine, of course. But this would just help me tailor the talk to what you might be looking for from this time together.
Annette, maybe we could also pause the recording during the intros and then resume it.
If people, if you're uncomfortable, it might be.
I can do that.
Okay.
Well, also
one. And so since we have a good amount of time, I will talk. I have some slides I want to share with you, but feel free to jump in and ask questions. This is informal, we're a small group. So just think of us as we're gathered in our living room and just spending time together. So it's a very informal, it's not an academic environment at all. It's just, we're all amongst friends here. And so I will, give my talk and then open it up for just lots of questions. And I will do my best to answer some of what you've asked me, but if I don't, please ask me again in the Q&A. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Okay, so I'm Mytrae Meliana, and you've already introduced me, but I'll just say I'm a women's empowerment and spiritual teacher. I'm a holistic psychotherapist, speaker and author, and also a musician. And this is a book talk about my recent memoir, which is called Brown Skin Girl, an Indian American woman's magical journey from broken to beautiful. And it's available on various outlets and retailers. Amazon, of course, is there, but there are many others, and an audiobook is in the works. Okay, so it's a journey. Life is a journey, right? I know you can all relate to that. And every one of you has had your own journey with its twists and turns, its stops and starts. We all journey through life. That's just our human experience. And every one of you also has a story. And it's a story that matters. And every one of your stories is important as a human being. But we are also born into stories. And these are often other people's stories. And often these stories span for generations and centuries. And sometimes it can take us a while for us to figure out whether we're living somebody else's story or our own. It took me a while, a good long while, perhaps longer than it would for most people. I wrote Brown Skin Girl to tell my story. I wrote Brown Skin Girl to understand my story when my life didn't make any sense at all. So let me take you back in time. I'd been lost for a very long time. I'd felt broken for most of my life. When I was 22, I was abducted by my family from the US and placed under house arrest in India for a year. My crime? I was in love with an American man and was sexual before my family would arrange a marriage, my marriage. It didn't matter that at 22, I was a graduate student, financially independent with an assistantship. It didn't matter that I had been in the relationship for a year and a half. And it didn't matter that my family was educated, mostly professionals, who encouraged me, in turn, to be educated and accomplished. What mattered at 22 to my family, my culture, and my family's religious guru was that I be a virgin until I married. At 22, I had no right over my body, no choice about my sexuality. When I was taken back to India, my passport, my wallet, and address book were taken from me. There was no internet at the time. I couldn't answer the phone or receive mail. My every move was watched, and there were guards outside the home. I would sit on my bed beside a window for hours, listening to the world go by. There was nothing else to do. I couldn't see beyond the 10-foot high compound wall, but I listened to traffic, footsteps, people talking and laughing. I listened to the world go by, and I envied them their freedom. I broke that year. I came to believe that I was bad. And I came to believe that everything that was so beautiful that I had known and experienced, which was my love, my music, and my sexuality. I believed that all that was bad. After a year, I was let out, but I was made to stay against my will in India. After 2 years, I escaped to the US. Yet, though I was physically free, for the next 15 years, I lived a small, scared, isolated, and powerless life filled with sexual shame, fear, and guilt. I grew up in India, a land full of ancient stories. The messages those myths gave me were that a woman's worth depends entirely on how sexually pure she is. It took me 15 years to realize that these are patriarchy stories, not mine, and certainly not the truth of my body. In one of India's most beloved myths, Princess Sita marries Prince Rama. For political reasons, Rama was exiled to the forest for 14 years, and Sita accompanied him. They lived a simple, happy life. A demon from a neighboring country saw Sita and fancied her. So he took the shape of a golden deer to entice her away. Sita wanted the deer for a pet and asked Rama to get it for her. I would, wouldn't you? Now, Rama would do anything for his beloved, but he also wanted to protect her. So he drew a line in the mud around their hut and said, "Don't cross it." But when a sage came begging for food, Sita saw no harm in crossing the line. But the instant she crossed it, the sage revealed himself to be the demon and abducted her to his kingdom. Rama launched a rescue effort, killed the demon, and rescued Sita. The only question he asked her was, "Are you chaste?" She said she was, because the demon had his own moral code of not taking a woman by force if she didn't desire him. But Rama didn't believe Sita. He wanted her to prove her chastity. So he organized a fire ritual. Sita stepped into the holy ceremonial fire and prayed to Agni, the fire god. "If I am pure, let me emerge unscathed." Agni, knowing her truth, didn't let the flames touch her body, and Sita emerged from the fire unharmed. Even after this ordeal, when a citizen questioned Sita's chastity, Rama, to look like a good king, had her banished to the forest for life, even though she was pregnant with his child. Her sexuality for the rest of her life would always be a question mark in other people's minds. There's more to the story, but essentially Sita crossed the line in the sand that a man drew for her. Though she innocently stepped across it, she was harshly judged and punished for life. This is the message that I inherited. I had stepped across the line in the sand. The story I'd been told, and the story I'd been born into, was that to be a good woman in the eyes of society, I had to be a virgin before I married. But the story didn't have room for what was a woman to do if she had been sexually abused as a child. It was a question I would ask myself and look for answers in the stories of my country. But I didn't find any. There were no models. There were no myths of women about abuse. It was a question I would ask myself but couldn't ask out loud until I was 40. What I discovered in my journey of healing and empowerment is that women are born into patriarchy stories. What stories were you told that define you to this day as a woman? What are some lines in the sand that were drawn for you? And what lines have you crossed with so much courage and because you had to? And are there still some lines that you haven't crossed? I was married to an Indian man for about 14 years. I was unhappy. It wasn't right for me. I was depressed. I was unfulfilled. And I was still in the throes and under the influence and under the web of trauma. I felt empty and broken. I was afraid of life. I was full of shame. I was a people pleaser and a caretaker. I thought love was duty and sacrifice. I thought staying married would make me be a good woman. I didn't know how to love myself or honor my needs. The moment of change came for me when my ex-husband physically abused me. It was a gift because I began to question. And this is huge for an Indian woman because it's a taboo, or it really was a big taboo then, and certainly in my family, to be divorced. In my family of hundreds, there was no woman who had been divorced. And if there were stories about other women who had been divorced, there was always clouds of shame that surrounded their names. So I began to question not just my marriage, but I began to question everything I knew and had been told was true. And that's when I began to realize that what I'd been told, the story of who I was as a woman, of what I could do, what I could have, who I could be, were lies. And I was finally done with that story. For you see, you don't just have a story as a woman. You're born into a story. These are other people's stories, other generations' stories of who you are, of what's possible, what you can have, who you can be, what you can do, and even other cultures' stories. I was done playing the part of who I was supposed to be in other people's stories. The stories of my family, stories of my culture, the story of my religious tradition. These stories told me who I was. They defined me. And I thought I had to fit into that mold to be accepted and loved. And as a psychotherapist, I can say now that to a child, to be loved is perhaps even more important than food or the idea of being loved. But a story that tells you you should take physical abuse and keep going despite it is not a story that wants the best for you. There wasn't room for my happiness in that story. I guess that's when I realized it wasn't mine, but theirs. I also felt on a deeper level that there was a different truth, a different path for me. That's when I broke away, not just from an unhappy, abusive marriage, but from my parents and family, culture, and religious tradition. I left everything. At 39, I packed up what I needed in a car and left to find myself. And that was the beginning of everything. I didn't know the way. I didn't know where the path would lead. I took the first step. What I did do, even though I didn't know anything, was to step onto the path. And I'm sure you can remember a time when you took a step into the unknown, when you didn't know where it would lead you. And in a flash of intuition, I had a literal intuition to start therapy, to go back to school, to become a therapist. And this was really strange because I'd never been in therapy, but I just knew I had to do that and heal. So that's when I started studying at CIIS in the ICP program, which is the Integral Counseling Program. And I felt like when I started at CIIS, it was like coming home. I had never felt so accepted, so seen, so heard, so related to and like other people. And I loved the environment. I made new friends. I loved what I was learning and all the processing that I was doing. I also started my own therapy. I felt like Rip Van Winkle, as though I'd been asleep for 18 years and was just waking up. My life was a mess. I couldn't even imagine being a therapist the way I felt inside, but I still knew I was in the right place. I just knew I had to keep digging through the mess that was my life and the lies that I'd been told and the lies that I believed about myself. So, in my second semester at CIIS, I was in my home, my little in-law apartment in the East Bay, and I was probably reading, a textbook, school textbook, and going over all the stuff because going to school at CIIS and especially the ICP program is to churn up everything. There's nothing that gets left unseen or untalked about. So everything was up. Excuse me. So I was just walking about, and at one point, I think I remember just standing in the middle of the room and just shaking my head and saying to myself, what happened? What was that? What was my life? So I pulled out my journal. I've journaled for most of my life. And I just wrote the first line. I am a child of the sun. And I couldn't stop writing. For the next 9 months, the book poured out of me. I would wake up at 4, sometimes even 3 in the morning, just to put in 2 or 3 hours of writing. And it was effortless. It just flowed. The story wanted to be on the page. It was like, how a sculptor just throws mud on. It was just this blob that just had to come out. It was a birthing. 9 months, right? It was a birthing. I wrote it to make sense of a broken life that didn't make sense. I wrote it to remember and to question the stories that I didn't understand, especially the ones that said that when family loves you, they can hurt you in these ways. And it's okay. And society sanctions it, and religion sanctions it. And one of the main issues I wrestled with was sexuality. So I wrote the book for 9 months, and then I put it away. I didn't know what to do with it. And then I showed it to a few friends. I showed maybe 50 pages or so here and there, and everyone was like, you have to publish this. And I was like, who's going to read this? It's my stuff. And so I did that for several years, but I kept revising it. It wouldn't leave me, even though I wanted to. I didn't know what to do with it. It wouldn't leave me. It needed to be out in the world. And so I was part of a writing group, and that was an amazing process to go through, just to have that support and to share. And I entered a few contests, and I kept winning those contests. So each of those was like a candle at the next turn of the road. Keep going, keep going, keep going. So as I revised it, the story also didn't finish. It took me. I started writing this in 2004, and it got published this year. So you'll see how long it took. But the story in the books ends in 2015. So I kept thinking for many years, why am I not publishing this? But really, the story had to finish in 2015 because of the healing, the answers, and my perspective. To be able to look back on my experience, to offer something of value to a reader. And the whole time I was in graduate school, the whole time, as a therapist, I was so aware of women from my country. Now, I am an educated woman. I was a professional, and I didn't even know all about abuse. I didn't know about trauma. There were so many things I didn't even know about. And I was very aware of the women, friends I had in India, family, and Indian women. And always thinking, I wish they knew about healing, about therapy. I wish they had words. I wish I could give them the words for which I didn't have words for, and for which they probably don't. It still makes me tear up because it's so close to my heart. Because psychology, you see, is a Western field. And, growing up Indian, psychology was kind of this, not quite taboo, but it was kind of this remote. It's theirs. It's not our culture, right? It's theirs. It's a Western ideology. It's not Indian. Because after all, a woman has to uphold the purity and dignity of a family at all costs. So at some point, I wanted Indian women to have a sense of what was possible, of a way to heal, of a story of healing. And throughout, my whole period of writing and revising, I've had them in mind. Also, women of color. We are sisters in so many ways, and we share similar experiences in the caste system of the world. I wrote it for women who've been abused, for women who are outcasts, who are trying to find themselves, who are lost, who feel broken, and seeking hope and inspiration. And I wrote it for immigrants, for women of color immigrants who come from traditional patriarchal societies and who are conflicted and had the same conflicts that I experienced and their families experienced between these, ancient traditions, ancient cultures, and the West, because it tears us apart. We are deeply conflicted. Do we stay loyal to these ancient? Who are we to question these ancient traditions, these ancient books, these ancient religions that go back so far in time? And can a lone woman stand up to the massive infrastructure of that, the pervasiveness of that. And I do believe we can. And that's why I wrote the book, that I needed to question everything I was told. It didn't matter if it was social or religious. I still needed to question it. And there was so much that needed to be questioned, but so much didn't apply to me as a woman. Because the religious path I was following was a patriarchal path. It was a very masculine way. It was a way of the mind. It was Vedanta, which is a philosophy. But at CIIS, what I read about, because I had been spiritual for most of my life, and I was deeply seeking for spiritual answers as well as the psychological. And that's when I discovered Tantra and the writings of Aurobindo, which is this exquisite, feminine, matriarchal tradition that honors and worships the feminine body and sexuality and Shakti. There, I found the answers I've been looking for. There, I found the truth, a feminine truth, a feminine wisdom, a feminine power, a feminine delight. Everything that had been told to me about sexuality, the opposite of that, I found in Tantra and in the goddesses. So I wrote the book for women to question the stories that they're born into, and to inspire them to question, and to just give them an example of what healing and empowerment can be, and to take those steps, to choose themselves, to start. So what did my journey of writing and publishing look like? Let me tell you, there's a lot of resistance. I didn't know what I was doing, although on one level I probably knew, but it was tremendously, I think, apart from the writing, I think one of the things I struggled most was how could I come out with my story where I talk about family and deeply personal things about my family, and just put it out there for everybody to read. You know, Indian women don't write memoirs. Asian countries are very, very tied to shame and guilt, and we protect, we hold close all that happens behind closed doors. So it was terrifying for me to think of all of that coming out. I didn't want to hurt my family, but I also the story needed to be told. So I had to do a lot of deep, deep inner work to arrive at a place where I felt full and aligned with owning and sharing my story. There were lots of times I didn't know what to do. I just felt like I'm doing this for years. This is ever going to see the light of day. And then there were times that I just was really excited and moved forward. So that was much of my story. Yeah. So these are some lessons I've learned along the way that might be helpful to readers, although this audience is so aware. So, you're probably well beyond that. But for readers, the lay reader, is the first step, I think, is to choose you. Choose you. And take the first steps, whatever that is. Get support. Find sisterhood. In sisterhood, we support each other. In sisterhood, we strengthen each other. Question all the stories you were told. Take those magnifying glass, I think, and just really question everything, because nothing is true until it's true, unless it's true for you. And commit to your healing journey. I do believe that when we say, I'm going to, when we make that decision, that the earth rises up to meet us. And I do believe that the universe, the goddess, Mother Earth, and all of nature comes forward to help us. Listen to your heart's whispers, to your body's tugs, and your soul's call, because you are your truth. You are the goddess. You are the wisdom keeper. You are the keeper of delight, of beauty, of radiance, of song, of dance, of music, of wonder, of magic, of mystery. Everything is within you. And every moment is a new beginning, full with possibilities. Trauma can be heavy. We carry it in our bones, in our bodies. But there's an equivalent amount of grace, of possibility, of light, of newness, of something magical beyond what we know, and beyond, certainly, the stories that we're told or that the world knows. And you can heal, whatever that looks like for you. It is definitely possible. Love heals all. That was the biggest lesson I've learned, that love does heal all. I think to sit here and be able to say to you that I have forgiven, to a vast degree, maybe not entirely, but to a vast degree. And that set me free. I didn't expect that. I don't hold that out for people as a psychotherapist. I didn't believe that it was right to even ask that of myself or others. But what I can say for myself is that opening to love helped me let go of my past. And it freed me in a way that I could not imagine. There is so much more to who we are than we know. We have the goddess magic in us. You've come from her. You've come from that magic. It lives within you and awaits you. And I had to add the very final, the divine feminine is very real. She's as real as you and I. And she's always with you, around you, hears you, sees you, comes to you, wants you to go to her, wants to hold you. You are her daughters. What was magical about my journey? What was magical about my journey was there was so much magic. I'll let you read the book and enjoy that. But a couple of things I can share are, it was my connection with the divine feminine, how she came to me as Kali, as Mother Earth, and as Mother Mary. Unexpected, unasked, but just showed up with a force that moved everything. What was also magical was the messages I received from the animals and the trees and the nature spirits and other spirits, such as waterfalls and lakes and flowers. So my intuition opened me up to the beauty of the feminine. My intuition opened me up. My journey opened me up to the feminine in so many ways. And I think I know some. There's so many more. But nature's consciousness, wisdom that is ever present and that we can tune to and tune into, that we can hear, and the presence of the divine feminine in such powerful, tangible, tactical ways. So it's changed my life. It's changed my work. I'm a very, very different person from the 22-year-old woman who was taken back to India. So that's my story.
Thank you so much, Mytrae, for sharing your story with us. Yes, everyone, it's like, yeah, it was very powerful. I just think it's on a personal level, it's as brave and vulnerable, just being able to put not only your personal journey and the impact of your culture and family, but also the awareness of not wanting to hurt your family, not wanting, because that's very, very real when we share our personal stories of pain. That knowledge that, oh my gosh, Uncle so-and-so or Auntie so-and-so is going to read this, and how are they going to react? And that can really block us from our own healing and being able to put our truth into the world. So yeah, I just admire that bravery and that your willingness to be vulnerable in that way. And as you were speaking the last part about the elementals, I mean, I've only read a portion, like at the first, not even the first 100 pages yet, almost. This when you were a child, how you were in touch with the elemental spirits, and then you speak about them coming back into your life with your healing. So I was wondering if when did they leave you? When you started menstruating, in my mind, I was going through as you hit puberty, and as all these things start to happen, and and the religion and the culture becomes more embedded. Do you step away at that point, or was that when you sort of lost touch with those beings and spirits?
I think so, to some degree, to those beings and spirits. Although, what I call the magic opened up for me, kept opening up for me with music, because I was studying music, and music would take me to these realms of otherworldly beauty, and as well as sexuality with that boyfriend at the time. It was so. I was opened in other ways, but being taken back to India shut everything down. Yeah.
When I was reading also, I was struck, my families were Jamaican, and I do have an Indian ancestor, a great or great grandfather, or even 3 times great grandfather. And just wondering about, just made me think of something. When I knew you in 2003, 2006, I had waist length dreadlocks. So maybe you don't recognize me.
Now I remember you. Those waist-length dreadlocks.
Yes. So where was I going? That train of thought has got derailed, literally. Oh yes, just the similarities actually in the cultural things, like even in and I was wondering, like, your family was able to have servants, but not because they were so wealthy, but because the people who came from the country to work in your homes, and we were sort of similar in Jamaica. We didn't have a lot of money, but there were servants, and so there are certain things I was and calling people auntie. It was auntie. And so they're just like, it's like, there's sort of interesting resonances that I found when I was reading the book. And this is more of a cultural question or a social question, it always strikes me that in a culture that's so reverential of goddesses and has so many goddesses, is so patriarchal, and that men can so casually feel free to molest women, like even on, in crowded situations and buses and trains. And that's always that sort of, I don't know, dichotomy is just always so striking to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Believe me, I've, I and the other Indian women here have lived that. It's really peculiar. It is patriarchy on steroids. It's very strange because the same men will go and worship at the goddess temple. They will go and take their daughters to the temple and pray to the goddess, but all of this happens behind closed doors. So I think it speaks to the human condition of being able to split. You shut out, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I mean, it happens in this country too, right? There's a lot of that. There's so many religious people, leaders who abuse. But it is particularly interesting in India that with this exquisite goddess tradition, how can men do this? How can how can I will answer that question, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make the only sense I can make it, I mean, I received so much from Aristika's course when I took women's spirituality. It's like the heavens parted for me. It was just this time of huge learning and going back in time and pouring through India's texts. That's where I went. Like, I went through this archaeological dig. Where did all of this start? With this beautiful tantric tradition that was so well in place, that was so powerful, so beautiful. When did this moment in history happen, when the shift from the matriarchal to the patriarchal happened, and the whole shift of power, right? And very similar to the West, where the witches go underground, the similar thing, the tantrikas go underground. And then women's bodies and sexualities. It is the same story, but it's a different form. It's the same story from that the West will tell, but it's just a different culture, a different form.
Similar story also in parts of in Africa from my studies also. I like to mention everyone that we're open up now for your questions and comments. I know there's one question that's on the chat already. I know you're seeing the questions also, Mytrae, so if you just want to pick.
Yes, I'll speak to that, which is, have you found any early myths in India that are not patriarchal?
Oh, maybe we'll read them for everyone. So
no, I think this is for everyone. Yeah.
Right.
So this if you go back into the tantric period, there are these beautiful stories of goddesses, which, well, they're not stories of women. Myths are more, I think, stories of women, but the goddesses' stories are literally of goddesses, but they hold the energy, they hold the archetypes of power, they hold the of the archetypal power of feminine power and feminine possibilities. And I love the tantric goddesses because they have them in all these different, if you take a diamond, the different colors and aspects and frequencies of the ways goddesses did hold that exquisite, fabulous power, as well as sexual delight, the sexual ecstasy, the sexual power. That is Shakti. I mean, it's so ironic because it's just irony, because in Indian philosophy, the universe is born of desire. The universe is born from Shakti. The universe is born from the seed of desire. And the fact that sexuality, that desire is the seed of everything, and then it is so negativized here, tells me how far we've come, how far we've strayed from what's true, from what's real. And if you take it back to all that you learn and you teach in women's spirituality, it starts with the woman's womb, the woman's vagina, right? I mean, that's the place of honoring. That is the temple of a woman's body. Not this, not this. This is needed, yes, necessary, but it's a tool. But the womb and the vaginas are where it's at. And so the story of patriarchy that we're all born into is the story that cuts us off from our sexualities, cuts us off from our bodies, cuts us off from our instincts, cuts us off from our intuition, cuts us off from Mother Earth and the goddess. So there are all these swords dividing us, and that patriarchy well knows what it's doing. It's zeroed in onto the most powerful part of a woman's body, which is the womb and the vagina, and said, we're going to decimate this. And what they do, even in Tantra today, and certainly in the West, in all these secret societies, is they use women's sexuality to charge themselves. A woman's sexuality gives a man power. There is an energetic exchange. So men, when the whole shift from matriarchy to patriarchy happened, patriarchy was well aware of that. And that was a power they seized, which was the magic of a woman, because a woman's ability to create, to bear life is truly magical. And that was what was believed in the tantric period in the matriarchal societies. So in taking away a woman's magic, men get to stay powerful. So what we have to do now, I see our work as women, is to question all these stories. And the West gets it as fairy tales, you know, in the different ways. But I think it's important to go back to the stories where even men and women were not equal, when it was just about women. Because I think that those are the original truths. Those are the original truths. So I'm sorry, I kind of went off a bit there, but to go really far back, then they're not in the mythology, you know, like Draupadi and Savitri, and these are all stories. There are powerful women. They've been powerful historical figures, certainly. But I think the true essence of feminine power, Shakti embodied power, we have to go back to the tantric texts, tantric wisdom and practices.
If you have a question, just raise your hand or chime in. Mara Keller.
Hi, Mytrae. I just want to start with some praises. I just felt your speaking and your message was compelling and eloquent and inspiring. I want to say I'm very happy that you'll be teaching in our program, and next semester you'll be teaching about women in Tantra. So my second question is if you'd say something more about the class you plan to teach. But my first question, it follows on just what you're talking about, the early women goddesses from a matristic, matriarchal, matricultural period in India. And I'm teaching women in world religions now. We had our section on women in Hinduism. And I was sharing the information about the male creation story that set up the castes from the different parts of the body of the sacrificed male. But there's another alternative creation story in the Vedas, which tells a creation story focused on Vak, or Vach, V-A-C, who is voice and speaking and related to truth telling. And I'm very intrigued with her because, of course, in women's spirituality, we focus on finding our voice and the power of our voice. And you do have a powerful but loving voice, which is why it's so powerful. So I was hoping you could tell us something more about Vach.
I can tell a little bit. I'm not, I don't have a full academic knowledge of her. But Vak, so it's Vak, which is voice, sound, word. there's so many creation stories, and one of them is in the beginning, which in the Bible is in the beginning was the word, and in Hinduism, um, there are, there's the Shiva Shakti, where it's the masculine and feminine. There's also the from an scientific perspective, in the beginning was sound, the very first vibration. So when you go all the way back, there was just consciousness, pure consciousness, right? There was the void, the mystery. You can say the God or the God, the divine. There was just the divine, and it was silent. It was unmoving. It was not nothing, but it was fullness, and it had the first thought, or the first I don't like to use the word thought because it's so mental, but I think you'll know what I mean. It has the first thought of being conscious of itself, and that was the first vibration of, and vibration is the most subtlest form of matter. And from vibration, sound was born. So from a quantum physics perspective, a spiritual perspective, that's the beginning of Vak. And so Vak is it's a power. It is that through word we create, through word, through sound, we can change matter. Sound is actually matter, and that's a whole thing that I teach in my sound work. But we don't need to get into that. But that, I think, so. Vak Shakti is the goddess of sound, who so. There's so many goddesses, right? So she's one of the goddesses who kind of is the origin of the universe, and certainly of the sound realm, the etheric realm.
Thank you. And then the second question about your course on Tantra.
I'll sure. So I'm not teaching that. I have taught that for, I think, a couple of times, and I've just thoroughly enjoyed it, teaching. But my work has now grown in a different direction, where I'm, offering that to women. Not exactly that course, but I'm really focusing on helping women heal from trauma, detox from patriarchy, and really come into their own, find their voice and power and truth, and connect with the divine feminine. So I'm taking it out into the world. I've loved the course, and maybe someday I'll teach it in some form. I just, so I'm not teaching that.
Oh, well, my misunderstanding then, but I'm teaching Women Mysteries, Sacred Arts and Healing in the spring, and I'll invite you to come. And I'm going to buy your book and read it. It's very compelling, what you've been saying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and a quick hello to colleagues and friends and all loved ones.
Alka?
Hi, Mytrae. First, I wanted to say that was phenomenal. Like, I knew I was interested because I'm always interested in South Asian women's stories, but I didn't know, more of the details of your story. And I was just riveted. And I also appreciated how you connected your unique story to larger themes and how you really brought us into your talk. And so my question is more about what your relationships now are like with your family. You said you come to a state of, forgiveness. It's a process. Doesn't need to be 100%. But if you could speak more to your relationship with your parents, or if you have siblings, or I don't know if you have kids or nephews or nieces, and just how, because it's something that I think about, having come into this field of women's studies, like how to still be in connection with community, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. When I started school, I actually didn't speak to. I asked my family. I told them that I wouldn't be in contact with them.
Mm-hmm.
They were very against my leaving my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And despite there being abuse, they still wanted me to stay. And I found that so profoundly inhumane that I said, I need I just need a break. So that break ended up, although I think we tried to connect in different ways, it just didn't happen. It took about, I think, from 2003 till about 2000, maybe 9 or 10. And, I'd been in therapy for all that time, but it wasn't until 2009 when I went to Brazil, which Shipra knows about, to a healing center, a spiritual healing center there, which vaulted me into an entirely different paradigm of healing, spiritual healing. And that was where I have received the most phenomenal amounts of expansion, of understanding my story from my soul's perspective. So to be able to, well, first of all, just it's hard to explain that kind of healing, but I was open to what I would call a divine love, an exalted love of the divine feminine as Mother Mary. I'm Hindu, still Hindu, but I have this powerful connection with her. So I don't know what it is, but it's there. And of course, a lot of other spiritual healing that happened. So it opened my heart to love and forgiveness over several years. That was a whole another, 8-year journey. Just that whole piece of. They were clearly, distressed and sad by my not being in touch, but I think receiving that kind of healing I did enabled me to open my heart again in a way it had been closed, and literally to forgive. And it was very beautiful. It was beautiful. It was very beautiful reconciliation. We still had lots of things we don't see at all eye to eye on, and they push my buttons, and I'm sure I still push theirs. But I think it was a time for them also to reflect. I think they also needed to reflect and go, okay, we can't just lock up our daughter. I think the family, or the larger family, some of them may have spoken to them as well. But whatever it is they did there, they went through their own process of soul searching. And they actually went with me to Brazil, to that center. So, I know that it helped them open in their own way to find the answers for themselves. And so now, we are, I do speak with them, I do go see them, and it's still hard for me. I mean, I'm very much an empath, and it's people, none of us change so much, but it enabled me to see them who they are as people, more than my parents. And I think was a psychological and spiritual development I had to come into, and not be bound by that. The heat and the bond of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah. They've grown. They've changed a lot. I really acknowledge and appreciate, the work that they've done. And I was able to open to receive the love that they could show me in their way. It may not be what I need, but to see that and honor that, I think has been our joint growth. Yeah.
I think
Thank you for that, because I'm thinking about my own journey with my parents and my family, and some of it is coming to see them as human beings, right? They're not gods. They're human beings, and once you come to see them as human beings with their own struggles and their own pain and their own history and their own traumas, then it made forgiveness that much easier.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Arisika.
So many years ago, I trained to be a yoga teacher, and we were taught that the knowledge of the body in yoga comes from the meditations of the sages, that they didn't cut open bodies as the West does. They meditated. And one of the things I was so struck by is the absence of the female body. And so as you were talking, I think you know that I was a midwife for 20 years and also had my baby at home. And so what I intuit is that there is deep, profound meaning in carrying a child under the heart and moving that child from one side of the veil to the other, that there's deep meaning in the soul incarnating into flesh, and in a way that is about love and the feminine, the desire to experience touch and feeling and love and food. In your research, have you come across any writings that talk about the interplay between physicality, spirituality, and what women's spirituality calls the blood mysteries: menstruation, childbirth, sexuality, multiple orgasms? I mean, is there writing about this that has persisted through patriarchy or not?
That's the field of Tantra. That's the world of Tantra. I mean, it's all about the woman's blood, the woman's menstruation, sexuality, her bodies. It is very feminine embodied wisdom, which is very different from yoga. So there are two major streams in Hinduism. There's the tantric path, and then there's the yogic path. The yogic path is more what I would say is masculine. And it's more about, leaving. It's more about transcendence. The feminine path is about embodiment and finding and knowing and experiencing and living the sacred in body, and opening to this sacred in that. There's a lot around the blood. There's a lot around the womb. Those are all in the tantric texts. I personally have not come across, maybe because I wasn't looking, for childbearing, particularly around that whole aspect of a woman and her life and experience. But I imagine it might be there somewhere. I don't know if those were translated again into English, and that's the whole thing. Many texts are not translated. But that's so beautiful. I love how you said that. Thank you for that. And I did want to speak to your question about caste. Yeah. So also, so I married an Indian man. So there are 4 castes in India. There's the Brahmin caste, there's the Kshatriya caste, there's the Vaishya caste, and then there's the Shudra caste. And I'm 3rd. So mine is agricultural. We come from the fields. We come from Mother Earth. And my Indian husband was a Brahmin. So he was the scholar. That's the caste number 1. That's the highest caste. So when we married, there was a huge conversation that needed to happen between our families. My Brahmin family was very loving and very accepting. But still, there is in India very much the sense of caste system. It's spoken about and acknowledged, unlike in the West. That's the only difference. It's the same thing. And the degrees are of course different, but this problem, this disease of categorizing people exists there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just quickly, I was thinking while you're speaking with Arisika, and that contrast between the yogic tradition and the tantric tradition was very interesting. Made me think of Leela or Layla and play, and the emphasis on play, of course, comes in with mothering as well in sexuality. So it seems to me that she's a particularly auspicious goddess, and I wonder if she's celebrated within Tantra.
Yeah, Leela. And Leela, just as a concept, Leela is the play of the universe, is the play of the divine. The divine is masculine and feminine. And the way the universe is birthed and keeps birthing itself is through the intercourse of the masculine and the feminine. And this is not gender, but these are the energies. So it's literally that these two, that's why you see in the tantric texts or the images, you see the masculine and feminine in intercourse. And that is the delight, the absolute ecstasy and bliss of creation. And that the whole thing is a play. And the, so rather than, and I think the goddesses, when in Hinduism, all the gods and goddesses really are depictions for aspects or qualities of the divine. More than, and certainly you can pray and honor and worship one or the other, but I think that the quality of everything is playful. And certainly, of course, in Tantra, the sexual goddesses are very playful because it is play. It is absolutely play.
Well, I think the West needs to hear more of this.
I agree.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments, Mytrae? We have lots of time left, so
I'm just going to turn on my light.
yeah. So Anka, did you want to?
Yeah, I have a question. And I'm also someone who's studied, yoga for many years and, has done teacher training and all of that. And thankfully was kind of in a teacher training where there was a little bit more of an emphasis on Tantra and like using the asana practices to kind of be that embodiment of the divine to really like feel that here. But I think that that's kind of like, a Western thing, like folding that in. And so, yeah, I'm curious, I guess, just what you would recommend in terms of how, like, who to read. You mentioned Aurobindo, and like who to read, what to look into to learn really more about those ancient, the ancient tantric tradition.
There are many books, a lot of them by Westerners, which is a good place to start. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I could send you some recommendations.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Yeah,
love to just dive into that more. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I had maybe kind of, I don't know if there's a question in here, but it's another appreciation or comment, and maybe you can find a elaboration here. One of the things that I really appreciated about the perspective that you bring is that, I find that so many South Asian women that I know that have been critical of patriarchy, right? They decide that the only alternative is this sort of Western materialist way of looking at the world. And so they completely shut off like Indian spirituality altogether. And so I just really appreciate that you bring forth that there is another avenue for a feminist spirituality within the Indian tradition. And we don't have to, because I think Western materialism is patriarchal too in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you for that. And, I wouldn't have come to it if it wasn't for really Mother Earth and the beautiful goddesses who came to me. It is so, I just feel it in my bones. I just so know it in my body, this connection to Mother Earth, a connection to the goddess. whatever her form, she has so many names. The names are really not important. It's just whatever way we relate and connect with her. That this, and it has been told to me again, as in the messages I received, that the sacred alignment of earth, woman, spirit held us. That was our umbilical cord, above and below. And this is what women rested in. If women are carrying all of this, what do women rest in? This is what women rest in. This sacred relationship to Mother Earth below, to spirit, goddess above, God. That, when you have that in you, then you can walk anywhere in the world. But what patriarchy has done has divorced us, separated us from that. And so, how we live is like, the phrase being out on a limb. It's like we are so far out on a limb, we have lost this connection to this trunk of our feminine backbone, our feminine cord, grounding and crown. Right? I mean, it's that that is what holds us, because we need that to travel in this lifetime. That's what we got separated from, and that is now the impetus, the momentum of this awakening that we are in, is to return to that, and not just women, but all genders. The masculine has forgotten this, but I speak for women. We can return to this, and it is available. It is readily available to us, and that's what I teach. But this is what the indigenous traditions say all over the planet. They all have the same truth. It is of the feminine, and I do believe that this is the only answer, the only solution for us all as humanity. It is to know, to remember, to reconnect.
Thank you for stating that so beautifully. As you were speaking, I was thinking of all the ways that we're sort of, when we're disconnected from that center, what's been put in its place is this sense of independence and power that's false and so connected to patriarchy. Because even thinking and reading about your mother, she chose the land for your house. She drove, she did all these independent, strong woman things, but yet she was so grounded, not grounded, ground by, put it that way, by patriarchy and being stuck in patriarchy. And you see that over and over and over with women in our culture who are, they're at the top of their game. They're at the top of the corporate ladder. They're like great politicians, but they're so disconnected from that center, from that grounding with the earth and crowning of spirit. And so it's like a false substitute,
right,
of power.
Yeah.
And one that really served patriarchy, and acts as if it is part of the patriarchy, but really acts from that place of patriarchy and of domination.
Right.
Yeah.
And through all the great falls and, through the centuries, it has just been a continual removing that from women, and then women turning against the feminine ourselves, as you so rightly say, right? Turning against the feminine, turning against our bodies, our emotions, our intuition, and going along, finding power in patriarchy, right? Exactly, as opposed to original, authentic power.
Yeah. And there's so much in prophecies of so many indigenous cultures that it is time to listen to the women. It is so many. It is time to listen to the wisdom of women.
Yeah.
And for women to reclaim and to find that wisdom, to tap into that and to own it and to honor it.
Right.
So yeah, it's wonderful to hear you speak and seeing all the heads nodding in affirmation. So, yeah.
I think that one of the things that happens under capitalism is, instead of that rootedness women are made to feel empty. We're not beautiful enough. We smell bad. We're the beauty industry makes us so unsure of the very physicality of our bodies. The you know the kind of patriarchy, the naked patriarchy, makes us feel that we're worthless. And so what's been taken away is all that deep, profound rootedness. I remember once reading an article, can't remember who by, in which she said that the fundamental thing that patriarchy does, it takes a child that about we know one thing about infants. They are born out of the bodies of those who are the birth givers. And it takes away that lineage to say they belong to a male lineage, which, it's like a big, big, big lie. And to say that the mother's contribution, which is so in front of our face, is nothing.
Yeah.
And it's the patriarchal contribution that is
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So beautifully said. And that lie is what we're born into. We're born into the story of that lie. And we come to believe it. And I think as women, our work is to turn that lie on its head, to see through the emperor's not wearing any clothes aspect of it. And in some ways I even find the limitedness of psychology, because it can be so anti-mother, and that negative. I think there's a place for diving in and doing that work, but it was created by a white male, and it still has that. It's not a feminine field. So I think the real original healing comes when we can reconnect with Mother Earth, and with the goddesses, and it's available. Yeah, and that's really the heart of my work now. Is well, why am I not teaching at CIIS? I'm trying to take this out into the world to help women detox from patriarchy and connect in these ways.
Mara, you're
Chris,
muted, Mara.
Chris, did you have a question?
Mara, you're muted. Who's speaking? I'm unmuted.
No, Chris has a question. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay.
I'm really digging detox from the patriarchy. Thank you for that. Put that on my pillow, underneath my pillow, swaddle myself in that. I so appreciate how you frame your writing process as giving birth to this text, giving birth to yourself, giving birth to voice in all these ways. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you feel that your creation, this baby, has been received and nurtured in the publishing world and in that capacity, and what the experience is of handing over this creation to be cared for by an editor and a publishing house, and what that's like.
So first of all, I self-published.
Ah,
I tried for many years. I did try because I wanted to reach. I do still want to reach a lot of women with the book, and I thought that finding a traditional publisher would really make that happen. But I wasn't. It wasn't picked up. It wasn't picked up, and that's fine. That's fine. I've self-published another book before, so the act of self-publishing is easy. Anybody can publish a book. I did work with editors. It was very helpful to work with nobody worked on the words. The writing is all entirely mine. Maybe the story, in terms of the crafting of the story, how do you craft a story that it's engaging for the reader? That was very helpful. And then, of course, just the final copy editing. But the writing is entirely mine and comes from me. It's very much my voice, my description. Everything it's me, and that energy. I think it's important as a writer for me to have that touch the reader. That nobody else can write or tell my story in the way I can, and I think that applies to all of us. That the energy of our words choice, of the turn of the phrase, of how we, of everything. Bach. I mean, this is the speech, right? It has an energy and a message in and of itself. So it was important to me that I am a writer, so it was part of it was what I needed to do. It's been received very well by the people who read it. Most people say they can't. It's a page turner. So it's written very much like fiction. It's like a fast moving. I wanted it to be engaging. I wanted to take people into the experience into the emotional and the embodied experience of my story. So that was always important to me, and that is just how I write. So but I still wanted to reach a lot more. and really shift. I wrote it to create change. It wasn't just to tell my story's medicine. I mean, I think the audience here knows that story is medicine. I really wanted it to create change for women who, like me, like where I was in 2003, not knowing what was possible, to open them up just to that, because especially women in India, therapy is not known. There's, self-help is not a thing. So how do you reach a woman through story? So it was important to me to tell a story, especially a story that people could not put down. Not something that put people to sleep, but keep them reading. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and I think that self-publishing is a radical form of resistance, and it detoxes us from patriarchy. Totally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that, Chris. So, if there are no more questions or comments from Shipra or Michelle or Simone, Nina, who haven't spoken yet. Okay. And if nothing's on the chat, so I would like to thank you.
Wait
Is there someone on the chat? No. Oh, Mara. Okay.
This could go on. Anyway, I'm so happy to get a chance to hear what you have to say and your everything you have to say. I want you to know I already went online to Amazon and bought your book. So I think if you self-publish and get on Amazon, it's available to the world. So it's there. And I also was, because it came up in my Women in World Religions class, you were talking about how the cut off from Mother Earth and goddess energies, and how that's the central core of connection, and how we walk with that spine or core in our lives. But there's the religious patriarchy, which has been regressive for women or oppressive. And then now we have secular patriarchy, which is cutting us off from spirit in another way. Either it's a male dominant spirituality, or it's no spirituality at all, except maybe mean-spirited non-spirituality, So I think one of my students asked the question is, isn't India now going through this secularization, where it's the conservatives who are going to renaissance of patriarchal spirituality, religion, whereas the modernists are going into a secularized world. So I don't know if you have any comment on those divergencies now. And I see your book, of course, as being a way to heal that split.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's a lot of fundamentalism that's in power, and so that's really sort of the far edge of the patriarchy, isn't it? And that's the most dangerous. That is the most dangerous for women, because it is. I mean, I've shared about this in the book too. It's part of my experience. The confusion, the veiling, the lies in the name of the divine that are told against women, that women come to believe about themselves and their bodies, it's just, I mean, it's just horrendous. It's just horrendous. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's the laws of Manu that have this, but the myth, if you will, or patriarchal teaching that women are born women because they're inferior, and if they're really good enough and they serve their husbands as gods, then they can be maybe lucky enough to be born as a man in the next lifetime, in the next incarnation. So I find that objectionable, obviously, because women are just as good as anybody else, of course. So, and of course, there have been feminist movements within India in the past. So I'm just wondering, I just see your book as a great healing possibility for people, not only in India, but here in the West and the US, who, because I think our notions of sex are, and sexuality are very confused and problematic or distorted or whatever, ungrounded, desecularized or desacralized. The founder of our program, Eleanor Gaydon, who wrote The Once and Future Goddess, and she was an Indianist or studied Hindu goddesses, she talked about the resacralization of women's sexuality. That was a very popular idea, that we need to resacralize our sexuality. And this is a role that women can choose and play, and enact and invite for others to join in this possibility. And I think that would go a long way to healing women's lives and the culture. So I see your book in that tradition.
Thank you.
So
And
Erika?
I just want to say really quickly in one response, I don't like Manu. He was just a man just spouting whatever he knew. No, absolutely not. What is what he says tell you about him, right? So it's unfortunately his social codes are very much in play in India, and that's part of the big part of the confusion. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask one thing. I have, the story of Sita has been one that I have found objectionable for over 40 years. When I speak privately to people, the idea that she's rejected, it's just so awful. But she's also the ideal model for being a wife, and many women, and I'm a cultural outsider. So I have not wanted to voice my concerns as someone outside of that culture. But can you
Please do.
talk about, okay,
Sure
how
you
one
can.
respectfully disagrees with that stuff?
Yeah.
Because yeah.
Yeah.
I second that. Please do. That's
Oh yeah. I mean, that was why I showed that. I mean, that's the whole thing about this sexual purity and dignity. So get this. So Sita is born from the earth. Sita was found as a baby girl in the furrows of earth, and the word Sita means earth, coming from the earth. So she's literally born from the earth. And what has gotten confused over the centuries is this beautiful tantric wisdom that patriarchy chooses to keep. We will keep the earth wisdom because it's good for our crops, right? But we will take away the power of women and have them live in a way that suits us as men. So it's this curious marbling, which is part of the lies and confusion that we get tangled up in. So on the one hand, there is this goddess wisdom that pervades everything. And so then Sita's story gets bound up with these codes of Manu, which say the woman is inferior, the woman must stay married, the woman must follow the husband wherever he goes, even if he, abuses her or whatever, that the woman is responsible for the dignity and the integrity of the society, but she can be treated in any way. And then it's her succumbing to patriarchy and her allowing herself to be treated that way. I can't hear you. Mm-mm.
Her death is so like the death in the story of that without her husband's approval and love, her life is not worth living. And that script seems such an awful, awful script. And it operates up through today.
Yeah.
It's
And you know what? I mean, in India, in the TVs, that's sort of this. People actually worship their TVs when those shows come on of Sita. It's like people will put flowers and puja to those when that show, because it is the worship of patriarchy. I mean, this is the lie that we experience, when the worship of patriarchy in a woman, that women buy into and are made to believe that this is what a woman needs to be and look like. And that is the untangling, the mental and the embodied untangling we have to do. That's why I say question the myths, question the stories, because they're partially true, partially untrue. And it is insidious how patriarchy has established itself in these models of the epitome of women, when really what they're teaching is their, being second and inferior and all of that. Yeah, it's just the insidious, it shows you how far the story has gone. Was there anything more to that? No, please, and please, yeah. You have all permission to, believe me, I've been right where you are and more. So feel free. All the stories, Draupadi, so Draupadi married 5 husbands. It wasn't so, but she had to go along because the 5 husbands chose her, and so she had to go along. I mean, there are numerous myths. Most of the myths I grew up with as an Indian woman was that this is what you do. This is your lot in life, and it's crazy. It's crazy making.
Yeah. As you speak to in the book and in your healing journey, even if we consciously and intellectually know that this is nonsense and we disagree with it and we separate ourselves from it on that level, it lives in our bodies in such deep ways, and that's where the deep work is needed, and it's constant. It's like layers of an onion, to be cliche, but it really is like that.
Yeah, for women to reclaim their wombs and their vaginas and their bodies. That's where it's at. That's where we can really overturn this, turn it around.
Thank you. So we're about at 7:00. So if there's one more, Simone.
Yeah, I came in because I wanted really to honor your work. I had to finish something at 6.
Oh, a little bit louder, please.
Yeah, I have a soft throat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I wanted to honor and show up here just because I think we are living in a moment of very anti-women, and this connection that you're bringing in of having us this invitation of reconnecting to our bodies, grounding in it, is vital. I find that it's really what we needed right now. So thank you for what you're doing. And I look forward to reading the book and being in other events with you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I just want to say that, yeah, I teach, so I offer courses and programs. So it's all about this kind of work. So if you're interested, just check out my website.
I've sent 2 clients to your events that they loved.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I just want to say something. I also want to say that some of you may not know Mytrae is an amazing musician, and she has some beautiful CDs. And if you are looking for just something healing, I recommend to get her music. I play it sometimes for my Reiki clients, and oftentimes they start crying when they hear your music because they're just releasing so much. So it's just want to appreciate that. Let you know. I appreciate
Thank you.
Are you a pianist? Or is this
I'm a pianist, yes. And now I'm a sound healer. I channel beings who come through for healing. And that's the whole other thing, revelation, right? That's another aspect of the feminine, being channels. We are conduits. And so, yeah, I've finally stepped into that.
Wonderful. Listen, I'm looking at the chat quickly. Let's see. So there, your email address has been put up for those of you who'd like to copy it at the chat. And Arisika is sharing a contemporary story. Is that a local musician from India promised his sister his firstborn child. He did not tell his wife of this promise, and she complied. Wow. So the family's been marred, but the wife had no say. My goodness.
This is the gender disparity. The woman does not believe she can have anything. You know, this is a whole other degree of women's rights. In India, we haven't gone through the women's revolution as you have here in the West. So we're in a whole other age. There is modernism in terms of technology and so on, but we haven't gone through the women's revolution. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking.
I just want to, I think I'm correct in saying that this talk will be on Women's Spirituality YouTube as well as on your homepage, right?
It'll definitely be on my website, yes.
Good. I'll find it there then again. Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So thank you so much, Mytrae. As we come to the end of our time together, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your wisdom and for you to share yourself and your story, so openly, and your journey to healing. It's inspirational, actually, truly is. And so thank you very, very much. Very honored.
It's just it's so in my heart is my CIIS community. So thank you. Thank you all.
Okay.
And please feel free to reach out.
Okay. All right.